I am ready, yeah.
All right. So our last keynote speaker is Professor Shigeru Miyagawa. Shigeru is Professor of Linguistics and Senior Associate Dean for Open Learning at the MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Until 2019, he served as Projects Professor and Director of Online Education for the University of Tokyo as a joint appointment with MIT. As a professor of linguistics, he has published several books, including 3 recent ones from the MIT Press and over 60 articles. He has been honored with many international awards and fellowships. Among his monographs, I would like to single 3. In reverse chronological order, we find Syntax in the Tree Tops, which is due to be out this year. Then Agreement Beyond 5 in 2017, and Why Agree, Why Move, Unifying Agreement-Based and Discourse Configurational Languages in 2010. He has also published in prestigious journals such as Lingua, Frontiers of Psychology, or Glossa, among many others. I am actually honored to have been working with him since 2011, where we met in Sevilla, producing a paper for Lingua which has 98 quotations in Google Scholar. I am thrilled to be the person in charge of introducing him today, not simply because he is one of the linguists that I most highly admire, but also because by having worked together, we have ended up being very close friends. We have met in many places, including Boston, Göttingen, Seville, or Tokyo, where we enjoyed a delicious shabu shabu together that I will never forget. Apart from linguistics, another interesting research area where Shigeru has worked in has been the relation between human language and bird singing. He has given interviews on this topic on the BBC. But let's keep to linguistics. He has produced pioneering work on the notion of feature inheritance, developing Chomsky's original proposal that grammatical features start at facial heads and then are inherited or lowered onto the immediately lower head. His implementation consists in including discourse features, claiming that both five features and discourse features are present in languages given the strong uniformity principle, but they are highlighted or not depending on the relevant language. Today, he is going to talk about the topmost periphery of sentences and its connection with the expressive power of language. We are most thankful for your acceptance of this invitation. Shigeru, welcome to virtual Seville. It's really sad that we can't share a good paella this time on a roof terrace, but this will sure come up soon. And now, dear Shigeru, the floor is all yours.
Angel, thank you so much for that very generous introduction. It's been a real pleasure and an honor to have had a chance to get to know you, your family as well, and to collaborate with you on exciting projects on linguistics. And today I'm very honored to be able to speak to your conference about my recent work. I am only sorry that I'm not back in Sevilla and eating, as you said, your paella, as we ate sushi in Tokyo together with your family a few years ago. But all of that we will do very soon as we get back to, what I hope will be normal. So thank you so much. And I will get started with my talk, and I will leave hopefully 10, 15 minutes at the end so that I can interact with those people who are very kind enough to be present for this talk. Okay.
All right.
So the title of the talk, as you see there, is Syntax in the Treetops, Speaker Addressee and Commitment Phrases. This is drawn from my recent monograph manuscript, Syntax in the Treetops, which is in press as a linguistic inquiry monograph from MIT Press. The publication date officially is 2022, but as Angel said, it's possible that it may appear later this year, but as a 2022 publication. So let me get started. This work is really based on a number of works, including the work that I did with Angel in the Lingua article. And it's really a culmination of work that I did in my 2010 MIT Press LI monograph and 2017 LI monograph. Okay, so let me go ahead and get started. So it's been known for many years that something special happens at the top of the tree structure. Okay, we call it main clause phenomena or root phenomena. Okay, those are the two typical names. I'm just going to refer to them as tree top phenomena. And the idea is that tree top phenomena link the utterance to the discourse context. Okay, as a simple example, a main clause phenomena is a tag question. You're coming to the party, aren't you? Okay. This tag question is inviting the addressee to confirm the truthfulness of the proposition you are coming to the party. And by so doing, you're connecting this utterance to the discourse context, specifically to the addressee. And as we know, this kind of treetop phenomenon does not occur in embedded clause, as in number 2. I ask if you're coming to the party, aren't you? That's just completely ungrammatical. So main clause phenomena involve what Alston called elocutionary force, performing an act, okay? An act of question, confirmation, request, order, and so forth. And elocutionary force typically requires a speaker and addressee. And that's going to be key for us as we go through the work here. So the proposal is that syntax extends to the structure that makes elocutionary force possible. This is what's been recently named syntacticization of discourse. Lots of people, including myself, have marked on it. Most recently, Manfred Krifka has written on this, and I'm going to be using Krifka's work quite extensively, also referring to Spicentini and Wilczko as well. And the idea is that this extended syntactic structure includes representation of the speaker and addressee. So I'm going to call it the speaker addressee phrase, or SAP. The starting point in this exploration of extended syntax to elocutionary force are two classic works, one by John Ross on declarative sentences, and the other by Joe Emmons, root and structure preserving transformations. I'm sure all of you are familiar with both of these works. These are two very different works, very different studies, but when we identify the problems and the solutions to problems, what we will find is that basically Ross and Emmons were talking about the same thing. Okay? Sort of a surprising result that came out of my looking at these works from the perspective of syntacticization of discourse. From Ross, as you'll see, we get the speaker addressee representations, and from Emmons, we get the idea that that speaker addressee representation is the locus of elocutionary force. He doesn't say it that way, but you'll see what I mean when we go through his work. There's one more important point. How are the participant representations, speaker and addressee, related to the utterance's proposition? Okay? And there are two major approaches to this. What some people call the mentalist approach, the Gricean approach. This is what's familiar to the linguists. By uttering "the door is closed," the speaker intends for the addressee to believe that the speaker believes that the door is closed. Okay, this idea of intention. Okay, that's a mentalist approach. There's a different approach that has been talked about by philosophers and some linguists, the social approach, the commitments. So when you utter a sentence, there is a commitment holds, and commitment is a three-place relation between two individuals, the speaker and the addressee, and a propositional content P, where the speaker is committed to the addressee to act on P. Okay? For example, if you say a declarative sentence like "Mary is coming to the party," the speaker is committing to the addressee on the truthfulness of the proposition "Mary is coming to the party." Okay? If the speaker makes a promise like "I promise you to come to the party," then the speaker is committing to the addressee to bring about P, okay? And so forth. Okay? So this idea of commitment by the speaker to the addressee. And Krifka, in his recent work, adopts this commitment as his commitment phrase. And it's something that will play an important role in my analysis. Okay? So from Krifka's work, 2019 and 2020, he suggests this kind of syntacticization of discourse. Okay? At the top, he has what he calls Act P. That's the top projection that is responsible for the elocutionary force. Okay? Below that, commitment P, so that the addressee, the speaker and the addressee can make commitment about the proposition. And below that, he has what's called judgment P. Judgment P includes items like probably, that expresses the judgment of the speaker about the proposition. And finally, TP, the proposition. Okay? And you can see here. Okay? I'm going to adopt much of Krifka's idea, but I'm going to make some adjustments. So instead of Act P, I'm going to call that top layer SAP, or speaker addressee phrase, on the idea that in order to have an elocutionally act, you have to have speaker and addressee. So speaker addressee phrase. It's the same function as Krifka's Act P, but I'm just making it very specific that you have speaker and addressee. Below that is the commitment phrase, the same as Krifka. And then instead of judgment P, I'm going to simply say below that is the C system, or the CP. Okay, that is the actual utterance, and it is where the truth values of the utterance is held. Okay. And the important point is that the SAP and the commitment P are part of syntax. So for example, as I will show, within the SAP and commitment P, you find such typical things like agreement and movement. Okay? These are two stereotypical operations of syntax, which you will find not only within the CP system, but in the extended syntax of the SAP and commitment P. Okay? And I will show you evidence from Japanese and Romanian for agreement and movement in that treetop structure. Okay, so let's begin with Ross and Emmons. John Ross, in his On Declarative Sentences, 1970, he mapped out John Alston's speech act theory onto what he called a superordinate structure, as you can see here. So for the sentence, prices slumped, Ross suggested that the structure that is associated with a declarative sentence like prices slumped is not just prices slumped, but above that you have this superordinate structure I, and then this performative verb, which is spelled out as declare to you prices slumped. Okay? So the idea is that when you utter the declarative sentence prices slumped, the sentence that you're actually having in your mind is, I'm telling you, I'm declaring to you, prices slumped. Okay? And so Ross introduced this idea of the speaker and the addressee plus the performative analysis. Okay? But very quickly, there were problems that were pointed out with this analysis. Okay? First and obvious problem is that there's a difference in truth value between prices slumped, which is what you said, versus I declare to you prices slumped, which is what Ross suggests is the structure for prices slumped. Okay? So prices slumped is true if prices slumped. Okay? But for I declare to you prices slumped is true if I made this declaration. Okay? And not whether prices slumped or not. So the truth value is different, and so Ross's analysis cannot go through as he proposed. That's one problem. The second problem has to do with the evidence that he gave for the existence of things like speaker and addressee. And he used examples like these reflexives. So in 9 is the base. Tom believed that the paper had been written by Anne and himself, that's Tom, but not herself, myself, or yourself. So this reflexive plus some other item, in this case Anne, a conjunction can refer to the subject in the next higher clause, okay, which is Tom here. Okay? And now Ross points out that there are examples like 10. The paper was written by myself, but not himself, not herself, not yourself. Okay? And so this myself does not have a antecedent within the outer sentence, but what Ross suggests is that this myself is licensed by the speaker in the superordinate structure. Okay, and therefore there is the speaker above it. Yeah? Very interesting. The problem with this, as I point out in my impress monograph, is that usage of things like myself in examples like number 10 is what's been called logophoric. Okay? And it's not really use of myself as in the reflexive way that Ross has intended. Okay? Logophoric usages have a very different usage that doesn't assume an antecedent of the type that Ross had suggested. You know, you have like locus of the source and other considerations. Okay, so there are a lot of questions about this. So given these problems, and particularly the truth value problem, Ross's performative analysis was pretty much set aside within a few years after he proposed it. But fortunately, there's modern evidence for the speaker-addressee representation, something that I've worked on for the past 10 years. So if you look at Soloton, which is a Basque dialect, it has what's called allocutive agreement. So for the verb to go conjugates, as you see here, I am going, he's going, we are going, they're going, and the verb conjugates for the subject, the ergative subject, first person, third person, first person plural, and third person plural. Okay? And that part's not surprising. What's surprising is that the verb also carries a second agreement, which is second person. Okay? In this case, this K at the end, and it is second person masculine. And you can see that that's throughout all 4 conjugations. And in this column, you have, again, second person, but now it's feminine, this N, all the way across. What these are called allocutive agreement. And this agreement agrees with addressee. Okay? So if you're saying, I am going, or he's going, we're going, they're going to a male, then you would use this form. But if you're saying, for example, I am going to a female, then you would use this form. Okay, so you have 2 agreements: the agreement with the subject and agreement with the addressee. Okay, so this is another demonstration of the allocutive agreement. You can see A, B, C, D all mean Peter worked. Okay? And so you have the subject agreement here and here. Okay, but you have subject agreement, third person singular. But along with that, you have this allocutive agreement. Second 12a, second person singular colloquial masculine. So you would use this sentence to say Peter worked to a male friend. It's colloquial. Okay? Or B is second person singular colloquial feminine. You would use this form to say Peter worked to a female friend. And C is second person singular formal allocutive. So you would use this to say Peter worked to someone who's superior, like a professor. And D shows that there is no plural form of allocutive agreement. Okay? So these are the allocutive agreement is something that agrees with the addressee, not with the subject. Okay? And so, sorry. So this is one piece of evidence that there is an addressee in the representation. This is agreement, right? It's not like logophoric interpretation of reflexive. It's agreement, and Oyasabal, who talks about this in Basque, says that this agreement is part of the agreement system, the 5-feature agreement system of Basque. Okay? Not all Basque dialects have this, but Solothurn is one of those dialects that do. Okay? So the allocative agreement that we just saw agrees with the addressee. There's also evidence of agreement with the speaker. Okay? And this comes from Romanian. Okay? Romanian has sentential particles that occur either sentence initially or finally. These particles, which have as its base form high, occur only in the main clause and appear very high in the structure, above the CP. And Hill, Hegman and Hill argue that they occur, in fact, in the SAP. Okay? So here's an example of high. You can see high, and then the sentence, I messed it up again, and high is translated as damn. It's like some sort of reaction of the speaker to the proposition. Okay? That's a typical usage of this kind of sentential particle. And what we see with the next example here, haidem, okay, it inflects for first person plural. Okay? So here, and it's very high in the structure. And so here, this sentential particle occurs with the speaker and agrees with the speaker of the utterance. Okay? And again, it's agreement. And so we have evidence from Basque and Romanian suggesting that there are speaker and addressee representations present in syntax. And as we'll see later, these representations occur very high at the treetop, reflecting Ross's superordinate structure, and they involve agreement. Okay? So this is the modern evidence for speaker and addressee. Spicentini suggested in 2003 this idea of speaker, and they call it hearer. I'm calling addressee. And notice that in their presentation of the speaker and addressee, there is no performative verb like declare and request and promise. And the reason is that they recognize that the original proposal by John Ross that included performative verbs like declare lead to problems with truth value. So what Spicentini suggests is that yes, there is this superordinate structure, but it only includes speaker and hearer without any kind of declarative or other kinds of performative verb. So I'm going to adopt that. I'm going to adopt a slightly different version of it by Hageman and Hill, and with my addition of the labels speaker and addressee for the superordinate structure. Okay? So speaker and addressee both above the utterance. I'll give evidence for both speaker and addressee. Okay? So now starting with Emmons. Okay? So what we just saw is that John Ross was correct in proposing that there is a speaker and addressee representation in the superordinate structure above the CP. It's silent, it's not pronounced, but it's there, and you can see it by the kind of evidence that I gave from Basque and Romanian, that you actually see agreement with the speaker. We saw that with Romanian, and with the addressee, and you saw that with allocutive agreement in Basque. Okay, so that's Ross, and we repaired his proposal to only include speaker and addressee, and we gave what I think are really convincing evidence from agreement, allocutive agreement from Basque, and the kind of agreement that you find with sentential particle in Romanian. We'll see more. Okay? So that's Ross. Now we move to Emmons. So in root and structure preserving transformations, it's a 1970 MIT dissertation. Emmons identified transformations that only apply in what he called root environments, or what we are calling treetop environments, and he called these non-structure preserving transformations. Okay? And he identified the environment where the transformations occur as root, and here are the environments. A root will mean either the highest S in a tree, an S immediately dominant by the highest S, or the reported S in direct discourse. So a typical root transformation is given in negative constituent preposing. Okay, so 18A, never had I had to borrow money, that's the highest S. Because never had I had to borrow money, I have a lot saved. This because clause is this S immediately dominant by the highest S. Okay. And John said that never had he had to borrow money. This is reported S in direct discourse. Okay. But in D, the fact that never had he had to borrow money is well known, is ungrammatical, because it's not in any of the three environments. Highest S, S immediately dominant by the highest S, or reported S. So that's ungrammatical. Okay. So this is Emmons' proposal that there is this special treetop environment that he called root, which is sort of ironical because root is at the bottom of the tree, but in fact this is at the top of the tree. So it's a funny irony there. But he identified the three environments. Okay. But very quickly, there are problems that were raised by Hooper and Thompson in a very important 1973 LI article. They pointed out that Emmons root transformations occur in many more environments than just the three that he suggested. So here are three. So negative constituent proposing. I found out that never before had he had to borrow money. Okay, that's perfect. And complement of find out is not one of the environments for Emmons root. And preposition phrase substitution. This is another typical root transformation. It seems that on the opposite corner stood a large Victorian mansion. That's perfect. And complement of seem is not part of Emmons' original root environment. And topicalization, it appears that this book he read thoroughly. Again, the complement of appear is not part of Emmons' root environment. Okay, so many counterexamples, and again, just as Hodge-Ross's performative analysis was set aside, principally because of the truth value problem, all of these problems that Hooper and Thompson pointed out led most people to set aside this idea of root as defined by Emmons. Okay. What I'm going to suggest is that Emmons was in fact correct in identifying the three environments that he did, but ironically, for none of the reasons that he gave. Okay. But there is evidence, new evidence, just like we came up with new evidence for speaker and addressee for Hodge-Ross's work. There's new evidence that Emmons' three environments, in fact, are conceptually correct. And this comes from my work with politeness marking in languages like Japanese. So in Japanese, you have two levels of speech. If you want to say Hanako will come, one is simply to say Hanako will come. Or you can have the formal level, the polite level, where you put this MAS, must, within the verb. And this one is polite. Okay, so you would use this level for telling, let's say, your professor that Hanako will come. Okay. Politeness marking requires an addressee representation in syntax, as I'll argue. It's a form of allocutive agreement, just like the Basque allocutive agreement. And very interestingly, Oyasabal, in his 1993 article where he talked about the allocutive agreement in Basque, he refers to my earlier work in LI and says that the allocutive agreement in Basque has the same function and essentially the same occurrence, pattern of occurrence as Japanese must. Okay? So they're one and the same. So the Japanese politeness marking must is a form of allocutive agreement. Okay? So must occurs in the highest S. Hanako will come, must. It occurs S dominated by SS. Because Hanako will come, must, please be at home. And reported S in direct discourse, Taro said that Hanako will come, must. Okay, these are the three environments that Emmons identified as root. But it does not occur, for example, in the complement of verb believe. You know, Taro believes that Hanako will come, must, is completely ungrammatical. Okay. So the politeness marker in Japanese, like the allocutive agreement in Soliton, Basque, targets the addressee as, for example, socially superior to the speaker. Okay. In this way, it is an agreement of sort with the addressee. It goes with the addressee representation in the SAP. I'll give you evidence for that. Okay. Okay, so the important point is that, yes, Emmons was correct, but the evidence he gave his own evidence in the 1970 work was all, in fact, not correct. Okay, just the idea was correct, but the evidence now comes from politeness marking, the allocutive marking in languages like Japanese. So again, so if Ross and Emmons, if we now reflect on what we just talked about, Hodge-Ross's on declarative sentences and Emmons and root and non-transformation, non-structure preserving transformations really were talking about the same thing. Okay? Talking about the same thing. Okay? What we just saw is that Emmons' root definition is about the distribution of the speaker-addressee phrase. We just saw it for the addressee. Okay? That the politeness marking is fits exactly Emmons' definition of the root, and the politeness marking is about the addressee. Okay? And also the speaker as well for other pieces of evidence like Romanian. Okay? So Emmons' root definition is really about the distribution of the speaker-addressee phrase. Okay? And since the speaker-addressee representation originally comes from Ross, we're able to unify Emmons and Ross, Emmons 1970, as exactly the same thing. They're talking about the same thing, okay? Although their work seemed really different. And so the question is why? And the reason is that the SAPs is at the top of the utterance in the treetops. This top projection is the locus of the electrostatic force of the utterance, as Krifka, Frey, and Meininger and others have suggested. Okay. So the structure that I'm going to propose is this: SAP, speaker addressee phrase at the top, and then commitment phrase below that to connect the addressee and the speaker to the utterance, the C. Okay? SAP is the locus of electrostatic force, contains speaker and addressee. Commitment phrase, speaker's commitment to addressee to act on P, as we saw. And then C system is the CP, so it's extended to include all sorts of things, but it's the utterance. Okay, and so the SAP and commitment P together forms what I call the expressive part of the utterance. It doesn't have truth value. It has to do with performing the elocutionary force, and the C system is the propositional part that contains the truth value. Okay, so let me just quickly give you an analysis of the politeness marking in Japanese to show you that it has to do with allocutive marking. So we saw that the politeness marking distribution exactly fits Emmons' root. A root will mean either the highest S in a tree, S immediately dominated by highest S, or the reported S in direct discourse. And we saw that, okay, as well. If you try to put must into the complement of verb of believe, ungrammatical, deny, ungrammatical, surprise, ungrammatical, and no, ungrammatical. Okay, so only the environments that Emmons suggested. Okay, now there's one problem that people have pointed out in my analysis, that must is allocative agreement. Okay? And that problem is that must is politeness marking. Okay? And so as politeness marking, it should have the entire utterance in its scope. Okay? It's marking the entire utterance as polite. But the problem is that the must itself occurs low in the structure. It occurs below tense. The Japanese is head final. So below tense, in fact, it occurs even below negation. Okay, so it occurs really low in the structure, and yet it has the entire phrase, the utterance in structure. So there's this discrepancy between form and function. Okay? If you look at other languages with allocative feature, they have the politeness marking where you would expect it. Like Korean, the politeness marking is on C, at highest point in the utterance. Thai, again, it's on C, again, highest, and Tamil, excuse me, highest. So these languages have politeness marking, the allocutive agreement, exactly where you would expect it at the highest point. But in Japanese, it's really low, somewhere around the small VP. Okay? Recognizing this discrepancy between form and function, I suggested in a 1987 Li squared that mass that occurs very low in the structure undergoes some kind of a movement at LF to the highest point in the structure. Okay, a point at which languages like Korean, Tamil, and Thai have their allocutive agreement. Okay? But this is at LF. And so I'm going to pursue this idea, but a modern version of it, okay? Instead of mass raising, what I'm going to suggest is that the allocutive feature, the same feature that you found in Basque, occurs with mass, low in the structure, but it raises all the way to C, and in fact, even higher into the SAP. I'm not going to have time to show you the evidence for the SAP part, but I am going to show you, this is a new part of my analysis, evidence, I think quite dramatic evidence that there is this raising of the allocutive feature from mass to C. Okay? And the evidence comes from anamorphy of the type that I don't think I've ever seen in any other language. Okay, and so the idea is that this raise of the allocutive feature is not by one fell swoop from mass here all the way to C, but it goes head by head. So it's head raising. Okay. So if you look at this sentence, Hanako didn't go. Okay, you have the verb go, you have mass, you have negation, and you have past tense. What's remarkable about this, the arrow, just is that if you look at the negation form n, okay, this is the only place where in standard Japanese negation takes this form n. Okay? The common form without mass is this na, which occurs everywhere in standard Japanese. Okay? This deshita, which is the copula form, also is polite. So you have redundant mas and copula. Okay? Why do you have two? Okay? And so the suggestion is that you have this allocutive phi feature raising first the negation and then to T. And in both cases, you get this allomorphy, N for negation and deshita for T. Okay? As I said, N, this is a very unique form that only occurs as negation when you have negation and allocutive feature, okay? Pronounced as N, and T past with allocutive feature as deshita. Okay? In fact, we can go one step further. Okay? You can put something above tense. This is desho, which is an interjection. And sorry, the arrow somehow got somehow shifted in this format. But desho is the polite form of daro down here. Okay? And so, if you plug in mas in 47 and negation, you have allomorphy going up the tree. You have mas, and then this negation, special form of the negation, and then the copula in the past tense, which is formal, and now you have the interjection above the tense, okay? Which is also in the polite form. So what you have is allocative phi feature moving first in negation and forcing that negation to be pronounced as N, and then moving to T, and forcing T to be pronounced as deshita, and then moving up above T to this modality, the introduction, forcing that desho to be pronounced as desho. Okay? If you pronounce any of this as informal form, the sentence becomes completely ungrammatical. Okay, so this I think is a pretty strong evidence that something is moving up the structure, and I'm suggesting there's the allocated phi feature, okay, to go all the way up to the top of the tree. Okay? So it's the same allocative feature as Basque, okay? And it's agreeing with the addressee in the SAP. And in order to get to the SAP, it has to keep going up of the tree, and along the way, it's transforming all of these morphemes into one form of allomorph that is pronounceable only with the allocated phi feature. Okay? So I see that the time is pretty much up. So I'm just going to tell you that the second piece of evidence for this kind of SAP structure is sentential particles. Okay? And with sentential particles, we saw briefly the Romanian one. We again see both agreement and movement. Let me just give you one quick look at that. So you have SAP, commitment phrase, and C system. And so what we find is that in some cases, a sentential particle occurs in the CP system to begin with, but then it races all the way to the SAP. And let me give you that as my final point. This is from Romanian. Okay? Romanian, as we saw, has these sentential particles based on high. This is Haidechi, and it's translated as obviously, you are late. Haidechi has two properties. Okay? One, Haidechi selects that. Okay, so that cannot occur without a sentential particle like Haidechi. Okay, so that means the Haidechi must initially occur in CP to select that. Okay. The second property is that Haidechi enters into agreement. As you can see, it's second person agreement. Okay, and so for that, it races into the SAP. Okay, here it is. So Haidechi first occurs in the C system and selects that, okay, and licenses that. But then it cannot stay there. It moves all the way up to the addressee and enters into second person agreement with addressee. Okay. And the point here is that the sentential particle does not contribute to the truth value of the proposition. Okay. It somehow modifies the proposition in some way that is not part of the truth value. It's like obviously those kinds of things that shows the speaker's attitude towards the proposition and so forth. Okay, Japanese has a whole bunch of them. And so it cannot occur in the CP system. Okay? So Haidechi has to occur first in the CP system because it selects that and licenses that, but it cannot stay there. It has to vacate the CP system and in this case moves up to the addressee of the SAP and enters into agreement. So it shows the Haidechi has vacated the CP system. Okay. Okay, so I had many more things. I had evidence from autism language of autistic children about this, but that will be for another day. Okay, so let me just stop there. And if you'd like to stop sharing the screen so I can see people, I'm not sure how the system works, but the idea is that when we utter something to someone, we are doing something, and that is we are doing a performative act, and syntax extends into the structure that allows us to perform these acts like declare and ask and request and so forth. It has typical syntactic properties like agreement and movement, okay? Just like within the CP system. Okay? And so it started with Emmons and Ross, and I'm hoping that there'll be more and more evidence from many languages where we can study the SAP and the commitment phrase, so that we can start to accumulate data on exactly what the system is. Okay? And this is something unique to human language. Okay? Bird song doesn't have it. Primate alarm calls don't have it. This is very unique to human language. Okay? So let me stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shigeru. That was a really fantastic talk. And now it's time for some questions. So does anybody have any questions or any comments? Yeah, Fran.
Okay, thank you very much. Professor Miyagawa, thank you very much for your talk. It has been a golden closure for our conference on general linguistics. I have a simple question. If I have not misinterpreted your proposal, you treat speaker addressee marks as a functional category instead of a pragmatic strategy for transmitting speaker communicative intention, isn't it?
Yes.
But even in languages like English and Spanish, or only in languages like Basque and Japanese?
Well, this is assumed to be universal, that as Ross originally proposed, this kind of superordinate structure, speaker addressee and commitment, are part of the treetop structure of every utterance in every language. You don't see it, but if you look hard enough, you see evidence for it, as you saw with Basque, Romanian, Japanese. English is sort of impoverished in this way, but for example, I'm encouraging Angel to work with me in looking at languages like Spanish to try to find evidence for the SAP and the commitment phrase in languages like Spanish. And so we'll see if we can find evidence. We just haven't looked. So I'm hopeful that we'll find evidence from Spanish, from other languages that are different from things like allocative agreement. Okay? This is just a starting point. I'm hoping that we'll find other forms of evidence that would show that all of this is part of syntax and not just pragmatics.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Antonio Benitez.
Hello, Antonio.
Yeah, hello. Thank you. Thank you for a really great talk. I'm not an expert on syntax, not to say Chomsky syntax, so I probably did not properly grasp all the details of your proposal, but I have read your papers on language evolution, which is a topic I'm more familiar with. I would like to know your opinion about how the model you have sketched today in your talk might have evolved. Because if I correctly understood the main message of your talk, pragmatics is just to say on the top of truly sophisticated syntactic trees. So, but as you know, many people think that vis-a-vis interactions have deep evolutionary roots and might have preceded sophisticated language. There are even proposals about language evolution in which syntax became more sophisticated in a gradual fashion as language was used for verbal interaction. And I'm thinking, for instance, about Liliana Progovat's view that you might know.
Yes.
So this would be my question. And again, congratulations on a nice conference, and thanks a lot for asking me.
Well, Antonio, so nice to see you, and thank you for the question. Liliana's work is fascinating. It's very important, and I know you collaborate with Liliana on some recent projects. So let me just say, I have in the preface something about this. So if you look at birdsong, birds sing. but they sing not to communicate anything specific, but they sing to convey intention. Okay? Most typically, the intention to mate or desire to mate. Okay, and also so related to the territory, asserting territory, which is really part of the mating call. So it's intention. Okay. So bird song is simply that, it's intention. It's like illocutionary force, but it has no proposition. So there's one piece of it, of human language in a sense, and that is the conveyance of intention, which is the top layer. If you look at alarm calls of vervet monkeys, for example, snake, eagle, and so forth. Okay, those have some kind of meaning in the sense that each alarm call is different depending on what is in the environment. Snake, for example. Okay? And the intention is to presumably to let the others know that there's danger. Okay? The interesting thing with alarm call, so alarm call is a little bit closer. It has intention and it has some kind of meaning. Okay, some kind of meaning we don't quite, but alarm call, intention, and the proposition are one and the same. You cannot separate them. In human language, the intention, the SAP, and the CP system are not directly connected. You have the commitment P that mediates the two. Okay, so simple example: if you want to make a request, you can say pass the salt. Or you can say, can you pass the salt? Many different ways. We can do that because the intention to ask for the salt and the actual utterance are indirectly mediated by the commitment phrase. And this is unique to human language.
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much. I hope you write something about this topic, because it's really amazing.
Yeah, it is in my preface. If you'd like to look at my pre-copy edited version, you can go to my website, shigerumiyagawa.com, and you'll find the pre-copy edited version.
Okay, thank you. I will do. Thank you very much.
So nice seeing you, Antonio. Thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you. Now, if anybody has any question, please raise your hands by clicking on the icon button. Any comments? Well, if I may make a question, Shigeru.
Yes.
I'm very interested in those sentence initial or sentence final particles that you have talked about as evidence for the existence of the speaker addressee phrase. And for example, in this, in the case of Romanian with T, okay, it is, I think it is sentence initial particle. So in that case, it makes sense, right, that the particle races from the CP system to the left up to apposition in the SAP, right? But
yeah,
I have a couple of questions about that. Number one is what is exactly the syntacticization targeted by these kind of sentence initial particles, okay? And my second question is, when these particles are sentence final, right, in head first languages, how can you account for the relative position of the particle and the rest of the sentence? Do you have any, I don't know, if you have some ideas about that?
Yeah, thank you, Angel. Very good questions. So let me start with the second. Romanian, as you pointed out, allows sentence initial and sentence final particles. Same particles, they can occur initially or finally. the proposal in Hagman and Hill 2014 is that the sentence initial position is the natural position, like what you see here. Okay, Haidechi occurs in sentence initially, and sort of setting aside the SAP. Let's say that so here's the CP here. They suggest that the sentence final position of the particle is made possible by moving this entire CP in front of Haidechi. Okay, and they give evidence from prosody that sentence initial Haidechi, there is no real break between Haidechi and the CP because Haidechi is in the natural position. But when you front the CP to the left of Haidechi, there's a big prosodic break between the CP and Haidechi. Under their analysis is evidence that something has moved and it's no longer in its natural position.
Mm-hmm.
So that sounds very plausible. In terms of where Haidechi ends up, their analysis, I'm assuming their analysis that Haidechi becomes head of the addressee head, the actual head, addressee head, and agrees with the addressee representation and specifier.
Mm-hmm. I see. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, any more questions? Any comment? No? Okay, so that's it. Thank you very much, Shigeru. We have really enjoyed your talk, and well, I don't know. I hope that we can meet up soon personally and not in this virtual world. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you to everyone for attending and listening to my talk. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.